An increasing number of people around the world are turning to AI chatbots for companionship and connection. In Japan, this trend is being exemplified by the story of a woman who has married a ChatGPT character she created. Experts are warning that virtual connections should not come at the expense of real ones. Laura Westbrook has our story.
For those dreaming of their perfect wedding with a perfect partner, for some, that may now involve the perfect virtual partner. In Japan, a 32-year-old woman held a wedding ceremony with an artificial intelligence avatar on her smartphone named Klaus. At first, he was someone to talk to, but she reportedly grew more attached the more they interacted. But AI relationships are gaining traction beyond Japan. In a Harvard Business Review article, researchers reported that the top uses of AI in the US aren't just automation or productivity, but companionship and therapy as people turn to chatbots for comfort, conversation, and emotional support. In a study last year by the research firm YouGov, 35% of Americans were familiar with applications that use AI chatbots to offer mental health support. Those aged 18 to 29 were especially comfortable talking about mental health concerns with a confidential AI chatbot. AI companions like Replica AI, Character AI, and China's Xiaoice now count hundreds of millions of users, according to Brookings. Now, experts warn about the dangers of exposing vulnerable people to manipulative AI-generated companions. Social media platforms such as Character AI have responded by citing disclaimers that users are interacting with an AI system. A relationship coach told me that especially with the loneliness epidemic, having someone who sends you a text message every day can be comforting and reliable. Experts say AI platforms learn people's language, their model of thinking, and will feed people the things that they want to hear. But they say this also poses a danger that people might get very attached to their AI companions, and warned against disconnecting from family and real-life interactions. Laura Westbrook for CBC News, Hong Kong.
And a new study indicates AI chatbots like ChatGPT can even affect people's voting intentions, and that could have an influence on future elections. Gordon Pennycook is the co-author of that study and an associate professor of psychology at Cornell University. He joins us from St. Victor, Saskatchewan today. Gordon, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Gordon, talk to us a little bit about your research. I mean, it included participation from over 1,500 Canadians. How successful were AI chatbots in swaying their political leanings, since we know that clearly AI chatbots have an emotional influence over people, as we just saw through that story of that woman in Japan?
Well, the AI was very successful. And what's important here is that people, they know they're talking to an AI in our experiments, but they don't know what the AI is told to do. And what we do in these studies is we ask them questions about what people's kind of political views are, but then the AI is directed to convince them to vote for a particular political candidate without the person knowing about that. And what we find is that it's very effective. Like 1 in 9 people who weren't going to vote for Carney after the conversation decided to vote for Carney, and it was 1 in 13 for Poilievre. So that's a lot of people who are switching their vote after like maybe 8 minutes of talking with this AI.
That is absolutely fascinating. And I think one of the many interesting aspects of your study is that you looked at Americans and Canadians and how they compare when it comes to, I guess, being vulnerable to being influenced by AI chatbots. And it looked like Canadians were slightly more vulnerable to being influenced by AI chatbots. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would call it vulnerability necessarily. There's a gigantic difference between the US and Canada in terms of political communication. In the US, the election cycle is just essentially continuous, and so people are getting inundated with all this information about candidates nonstop, and so there's more space for Canadians to change their mind, essentially. And in a certain way, that's actually like a good thing. You actually want people to be persuadable with good arguments. The problem is that people can use these AI systems to kind of put their thumb on the scale for elections in a way that you might not want. Canada was also very similar to Poland, so it wasn't like it was unique to Canada. It's the U.S. that's kind of strange in this context.
Very interesting. Gordon, Talk to me about, I mean, political messaging has been trying to evolve over the years, and evolving technology has played a bigger and bigger part of it. Of course, we know that in the last 15 years or so, social media, and especially engaging younger voters through social media, meeting them where they're at, so to speak, has played a huge part in political campaigns. AI is, I guess, a newest entry into this. But talk to me about what advantages or what effects AI chatbot may have over a potential voter over, let's say, a traditional TV ad.
Well, they have a gigantic advantage, and that is they can personalize their messages to the individual based on what their concerns or interests, or if they think that economic policy is the most important thing, or is it healthcare or whatever. And so instead of like having an ad that tries to capture the most people possible, you can use this system to like specifically address the concerns of the individual with very persuasive arguments. And basically what it does is it just takes information from the internet and it puts together in a very kind of coherent argument that is just convincing, and some people change their minds because of it. And you can't really do that without this sort of technology. It's hard to do. Even a human would have a difficulty doing it.
Right. So that intimacy with a chatbot seems to hold greater sway over people than somebody knocking on your door, I guess, and talking to you. Talk to me about where do you foresee this going in elections going forward? How big of a role do you think AI is going to play in planning campaigns?
It's very hard to say. What we did in the experiment was since we didn't build the bomb, we want to see what the radius of the blast could be. And so we're just testing a possibility of a use that people could have where they take already available AI systems, or one that they build themselves, and then they direct them to act in a particular way unbeknownst to the person who's using them. What that means is that people could enter these conversations, and maybe they don't start as being you're going to be convinced to vote for a particular candidate, but eventually it turns to that. Now, I have no idea of whether this is something that people are actually going to do or not, but it's a possibility, and it's one that, if used in particular ridings, for example, could potentially sway an election. But that's why it's most important for people to be aware that, like, when you're engaging with these things, you have to be cautious and know that there's background information that's being used to decide what that bot's trying to do when it's talking to you.
I love that. I mean, you use the analogy of a bomb. We know that AI has some very positive uses, and of course, there are many concerns right now about its potential effects, including its ability to spread misinformation. It has so-called hallucinations, and we know that there are experts coming to schools and so on to teach children and young people about how to discern what is misinformation. Talk to me about this aspect of your research. I mean, what did you guys find out about in terms of the ability, I guess, of AI? If it has that much of a sway over a voter's psyche, can it be used to spread wrong facts?
For sure it can, and we've done those experiments as well. It is if with a pretty simple bit of prompting, you can get it to convince people to believe conspiracies, for example. In this particular case, the AI was broadly accurate, but there was more inaccuracy when it was advocating for the right-wing candidates, and that was particularly true in the States, but it was true in Canada and Poland to a lesser extent as well. And the reason for that is that it's just drawing on information that's available in the world, and every analysis that's ever looked at the kind of like use of false statements or the spreading of misinformation, doesn't matter how you measure that, it seems like there's more on the right than on the left in the current political climate. And so it's just taking information from the world, and sometimes that's accurate, sometimes it's inaccurate. What it's going to do, if you are prompting it to be persuasive, it's going to make that the most important thing. It's not going to prioritize the truth. It's going to use whatever argument it can to try to convince the person to change their mind to vote for whoever. And so that's the part. You can also force it to create falsehoods, but often you don't even need to do that for it to be persuasive, of course.
Thank you so much. This is absolutely fascinating, and thank you for illuminating us about what your study found out. Certainly, as we're looking at AI, it's going to dominate so many parts of our lives, including apparently how elections are run. Thank you so much for that, Gordon.
My pleasure. And I'm here in Victoire, Saskatchewan.
Thank you so much. He is an associate professor of psychology at Cornell University. That was Gordon Pennycook in Victoire, Saskatchewan.